Today I want to look at life in the 1850s. Thanks for being here, God bless, and welcome. Sorry if you can hear the fire in the background. Even after the bulk of winter has passed, I like having fires in the morning. Right now the door's open. More of a luxury and less a necessity. Somebody recently sent me a portion of my family tree. It was really fascinating. I've discussed my family history in a past video, and orally, mine and many of our histories will be different than what is actually discoverable as far as records go. And I was able to verify everything I saw. I recognized the names brought up in my family in the past, and really it went back to 1860 approximately in Greece, the city of Salonika. And I did some research into it. And the written history, though skewed to some extent, pretty much read like my oral family history. And really reading like the Native Americans of North America, persecuted after having resided there for many generations, and eventually removed by train and burned. And that's the written history that was in Wikipedia. But my family history, my father says the people were not removed, but rather the city was bombed. Either way, a similar fate. But today I want to look at some pictures in 1850. Again, my family history begins with extreme poverty in Greece, and my grandfather would join the French Foreign Legion in search of a better life. And I think the French Foreign Legion was acting similar to British colonialism, essentially inheriting, revitalizing, and repopulating. And the histories of all of these cities are much older. So they tell us 160 years ago the world was in a state of transition. The Industrial Revolution had laid the groundwork for rapid modernization. Steamships, telegraph lines were making the world a smaller place. The United States was struggling with issues of slavery and trying to avoid a civil war, and new inventions were becoming an indispensable tool for artists and journalists, this being the camera. So again, struggling with issues, we are told, of slavery and trying to avoid a civil war, the camera is invented, and we get a picture, many pictures, of this time period. Now, I want to put perspective in this video. Perhaps I'll flash buildings of this time period, which is what we usually look at on this channel. And I want to compare these people to the buildings. And I want you to ask yourself, are these people responsible for these buildings? And not just in America, but all over the world. It doesn't matter. This is the only evidence we have, besides books, for the beginning. Before this, we have paintings and lithographs, sculptures and architecture. But this is the beginning. And here we go. 5 men playing cards in 1850. Really looking unnatural. Perhaps the most awkward, posing for a photo. And I question whether all these photos aren't just staged to sell a history. So here we see a group in London, Blackwall, London, 1857. They're observing the launch of a ship. So here we can see that their clothes is very nice, but very dirty. Like you just get one suit. We see the hand tucked away in the coat. And this could be a group of actors that would essentially play all these different roles. Here we see some French ambassador of Napoleon III and Queen Victoria, 1857. I think he looks like he's had a little too much to drink, but nonetheless, here he is. Here is President Martin Van Buren, next to this elaborate tassel. 1855? Really? Did we vote for this man? History tells us yes. Here is a man, woman, and boy hanging out in front of the Niagara Falls. Really interesting attire, especially the child. Very stern. And here we go. 1857, downtown Boston. A public market, the Quincy Public Market. Recently I will have shared a whole bunch of domes with holes in the top. Here we see a dome, but we see the tech still intact. Remove the tech and you have a hole in the top. Big old square building, not too dissimilar from the Parthenon, whatever. And here this building is the Ames Plow Company. Of course, big old columns, and real busy today at the Ames Plow Company. A little traffic jam out in front here, a horse and buggy jam. And does this make sense? The Ames Plow Company should be a big wood building. It should resemble their wagons in that building style. This is what we're building. Oak barrels, fabric. We see the cheap fabric they've hung up on the south side here, the sunny side of the building. And the same fabric their wagons have draped around them. Now Jerusalem. Here we go. Jerusalem. Domed buildings everywhere. 1857. Looking super abandoned. Someone just slipped in to take a picture. And they tell us of centuries of power struggle in this area. Two different people responsible for much of the architecture. In fact, three different people, at least. And yet when I look at this picture, I see one people having built all of this, and now, for quite some time, having been displaced. Even those little mini buildings in the foreground on the bottom right corner have plants growing out of the top of them. All the buildings have plants growing out of the tops and the sides. And this was a thriving, advanced civilization before it turned into this wasteland, still looking very beautiful. And I question the history before 1850. There is the possibility that it's all true, and what would be left out is how absolutely advanced the people were. What would also be left out is the cataclysm that wiped out every city in this realm before 1850. Here is some men working besides a giant ship, the Great Eastern, while under construction. It doesn't look like there's any construction going on here. They may have built this wooden staircase right here to get them up to the ship. This may have a lot of clues. This giant wheel appears to be the propulsion drive. It looks like the driving force for this vessel. It also looks like a Ferris wheel. I've discussed how all the rides at the World's Fairs seem like machinery, and they have simply turned them into amusements, figured out how to power everything again. I mean, when we look at Luna Park at Brighton Beach in New York, there were like 5 amusement parks in the area, and they really look like they had more of an industrial use originally. Anyway, here they're telling us they're building this ship. Look at these guys. Just hanging out, men in top hats. They're certainly not working. And we can get a feeling, even for these people in the 1850s, their body language tells a story. Tells a story that they're just hanging out, have nothing to do with this monstrosity behind them. And really, these people don't even look like they're actually here. They seem like they've been added to this photo. Look at the size of the chains behind them. Again, this is 1850s. Horse and wagon. Look at this mess of metal and chains, motors up there, driving that wheel. It doesn't make sense. Not from their perspective. Here are some ladies. One of them is missing a head. That's alright, we can see more without her head. And look at this city behind them. I mean, this is like a 500-year-old city behind them. And this is 1857. It tells the same story. We see the horse and wagon behind them. We see piles of mud in the street. Brick out in the river. Ancient walls. Ancient city. Now this is supposed to be the Emperor of France in 1857. What a stooge. You can see his crusty mustache. He's put some kind of wax in it, or grease, twirling it to a point. And in my opinion, just a poser. He has this really nice costume, and yet he hasn't showered in a long time. He didn't even brush his hair this morning. And this is the Emperor? What kind of orders is he gonna give? Who is gonna take him seriously in this time period? Here is his city, 1857, Paris. So we see massive boats, like buildings, floating in this river. Building boats, a whole bunch of them. The streets are absolute mud. Nobody to be seen except for a horse and wagon on the bottom left corner. And just super built out. No different than today. Every inch built out, every road engineered to perfection, bridges, and very few people be seen in this city of millions in 1857. Here is Peter Force, the 12th mayor of Washington, D.C., 1836 to 1840. Come on. Again, who voted for this man? How did you even organize the vote in 1840? This looks more like Beethoven. Very unenthusiastic mayor, but we'll move on. Here we see a couple in Battle Creek, Michigan, 1850, looking very elegant and kind of dead inside, soulless. The Native Americans said that the camera would capture your soul, and they avoided taking pictures. Here's a lady in 1856, the Baroness of Severac. There we go, Baroness. I am the Baroness. Okay, I didn't mean any disrespect. Here we see a gathering in 1857. Here's San Francisco in 1856. Totally built out, every square inch. Here we see the old hag in 1857 and her inheritors. There we go, with their oxen. Oxen is just a cow. It's interesting how sometimes they call the cow an ox. Even today, if you buy cow tails in the supermarket, they will call them oxtail. The Mormons were said to arrive in Salt Lake City with teams of oxen. It sounds better than arriving with teams of cows. Here we can see India. I love old India. And we can see these buildings have been essentially bombed out. Totally reset. No windows. Dirty. No roads. The river has overflowed long before this picture and made a mess of everything. This is a really interesting vessel. It looks like it's been woven like a basket, a big basket boat. Really interesting that they made it look like a fish. They tell us all this was destroyed during the Indian Rebellion of 1857. We're told that these cities are just cooked out because of their 1857 Indian Rebellion. And we don't know. Again, we don't know about these dates. We're just told that these are some of the earliest photographs. These could have been taken in the early 1900s and backdated. Here we can see that this is a picture of the Parker House Hotel, possibly, they tell us, in the late 1850s. And that is how our history reads. Possibly. Here we can see the pyramids of Dashur in 1857. And this is actually really important. This is a great case for meltology. I mean, here they're telling us these are pyramids, and we can see the squareness of this one in the foreground. It has not fared as well as the one in the background. But this is essentially what the mountainous regions all throughout the realm are: cooked out structures. The sand being material from these buildings in ancient cities. And in other places like Paris, we see the entire city surviving. But the common theme is the people of this time do not continue. And we have proof of this today. These buildings take longer to repair in modern times than they did supposedly to build in their respective time period. Now I want to show this time lapse of them rebuilding this Olmsted hydroelectric power plant in Provo, Utah. Absolutely fascinating. It's a good case study for showing what not only a building but a hydroelectric building would look like. This is the building that will house the new turbines. If you remember in my past video, we discussed how the original dam was built by Westinghouse in exchange for a pouch of gold. Yes, a pouch of gold. Horse and buggy, they brought in turbines not too dissimilar from what we see today out of New York, designed by Nikola Tesla in the early 1900s. Now they're rebuilding the plant, putting in 3 turbines, brand new, and we can see what it takes. Now, it's not fair to say that they're even doing this from scratch. They're going to use the old channel, the old canal, essentially the footage that I shot up there, all that old infrastructure, already piped through the mountains, coming from 100 miles away in the Uinta Mountains, and they're essentially just putting on new fittings at the end point. All of the channeling, all the old infrastructure, and even the old power plant, the old one that was being utilized until very recently, until they built this new building to house the new turbines. It's to say it was all adequate. They had the same end result in the early 1900s, but things get old. Things do need repaired. Machinery fails. But once again, I thought this was a great case study, not just for what it would take to build a power plant today, a hydroelectric plant, but what it should have taken 160 years ago. Every building you see in the old world will have required this same technology. Cranes, backhoes, heavy trucks, everything. Every day, moving them from one location to another. All these machines have to be brought in on trucks. We see them building a small road. We see porta potties. And here we see the completed facility. And very interesting how they made it look as old world as possible. And I've discussed how they're trying. I'm not sure if it has something to do with our research, but they are trying to bring back the old world look, as they should. I don't blame them. Everything else is ugly. The modern architectural style, often called brutalist, is just plain ugly. I didn't talk about anything that I was going to. Still on my list of shares, the LBRY, Milledgeville, Georgia. A whole abandoned city in Georgia. Milledgeville was once the capital. But anyway, I just saw some pictures of the interior of the Mormon Salt Lake Temple. Now, if you don't know, it's very secretive in there. You must have credentials to get in. Here we can see the oldest picture that I found, and they've turned it into a little salon, and nothing has changed. Here we see it in present times. I'm not even sure if the furnishings have changed, and I'm glad. Here you go. The interior of the celestial room. Really just looking Greco-Roman, over the top. And then this was pretty interesting. Here we go. Just a little slice. I mean, it goes in all directions. We're not even seeing the oval-shaped tabernacle building. That would be right around here, where my pointer is. Just a little slice. Here we go. So, are we just seeing the top of the building? Is that why it looks so top-heavy? The rest of the building is underground. And if you remember, I made a video and talked to a construction worker when they were doing renovations, and he did confirm this. It went down several stories, like some archaeological dig. It seemed to baffle them. So that's it, just a little look at history from a different perspective. I thank you all for joining me. I love you all. God bless, and I'll see you next week.